The interview you're about to watch, Parish Orphans and Retrogrades, is an excellent one, full of insights about Fatima as it is relevant to us in 2022. Now, it's with a great, honored, venerated guest, Bishop Athanasius Schneider. I just wanted to give you, Parish Orphans and Retrogrades, a little heads up because he came to me from Kazakhstan on Skype, which is a modality I don't use so much anymore for these interviews. It was pre-recorded, and we had to do a little bit of audio cleanup, which was 90% effective. It's good we didn't do this live because the audio needed quite a bit of cleanup. So without further ado, I give you the interview as it happened. I think it's really good. Just struggle through the 10% of it that's not perfectly cleaned up. It's much, much better than what was originally would have been presented. God bless you all. Greetings, Parish Orphans and Retrogrades. Today I bring to you a most important interview with Auxiliary Bishop of the Archdiocese of St. Mary in Astana, Kazakhstan, His Excellency Athanasius Schneider, who comes to me today to discuss the meaning of March the 25th's consecration to humanity, inclusive of hopefully namely Russia and the Ukraine. What does this mean for a Pope to consecrate all of humanity with Russia and the Ukraine named? Is this sufficient to satisfy the conditions left by the Virgin Mary to Sister Lucia dos Santos in 1917? Also, what is the broader meaning of Russia in the second secret given to Sister Lucy at Fatima in 1917? And we even get into the meaning of the third secret, the most hidden, the most mystical of all the three-part secret given in 1917. Without further ado, I am most honored to welcome, for the first time ever on Rules for Retrogrades, His Excellency, Bishop Athanasius Schneider. Thank you for joining us. And Your Excellency, would you please, if you would, lead us in an opening prayer, and then we can get down to business.
In nomine Patris et Filii et Spiritus Sancti. Amen. Ave Maria, gratia plena, Dominus tecum, benedicta tui mulieribus, et benedictus fructus ventris tui, Iesus. Sancta Maria, Mater Dei, ora pro nobis peccatoribus, nunc et in hora mortis nostre. Amen. Gloria Patri, et Filio, et Spiritui Sancto, sicut erat in principio, et nunc et semper, et in saecula saeculorum. Amen. In nomine Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti. Amen.
Pope Francis announced on March the 15th that 10 days later he would be doing this consecration of Russia. Within a week, on March 20th, 21st, depending on what part of the world one is in, he modified the nature, the direct object, I should say, of the consecration from Russia and the Ukraine exclusively to humanity, including Russia and the Ukraine. Now, from what most people speculate, this still will include a specific naming of Russia and the Ukraine. My first question is this sufficient to satisfy the conditions left by the Virgin Mary in 1917 at Fatima?
I think Our Lady did not say exclusively Russia or only Russia. We do not find this invitation, and therefore we cannot be more limitative than Our Lady. And so I think that also we have to bear in mind that the essential is she asked to mention Russia. So this is the essential. And when it is mentioned explicitly Russia, and then to mention all the nations of the world, so humanity, it means all the nations of the world, it is not invalidating because it cannot damage, because it will be, of course, pleasing God. And I repeat, when something is substantially mentioned, something additionally, or the philosophers would say, accidental something which is, when substance is there, the substance, then some additional will not, cannot substantially change it, because all the people is not a completely alien element. This is, Russia is a member of the entire humanity, and therefore I do not consider this element as something invalid.
That's very reassuring. So as long as the essential components, namely Russia, I guess Ukraine, but namely Russia, is included in the consecration done on March the 25th, it will satisfy the conditions named by Our Lady of Fatima, correct?
Yes, and Ukraine, in 1917, Our Lady spoke on July about Russia. She had before her eyes the Russia of that time in 1917, and the major part of the present day Ukraine was in 1917 Russia. And I repeat, this territory today measure was a part of Russia. And therefore, today, Our Lady, if the Pope will mention only Russia today, it will be lacking the territory, a great part of territory which Our Lady had before her eyes in July 1970. And this makes good sense. A specific mention of Ukraine is completely meaningful in this way, because it was Russia, actually.
A Dostoevsky fan such as myself notes that Kiev, and where it's situated, the Ukraine, have historically been included in Russia throughout the years, making the Ukraine an utterly appropriate inclusion in the Marian consecration. Is this correct?
Yes, it is very meaningful and logic for me to mention Ukraine, and also the current situation which we know of the painful war situation. It would be more difficult to mention Russia in this conflict. We have to understand the specific historical circumstances, and that Our Lady spoke in 1970. We cannot take these words to give them the level of a public revelation. It remains theologically a private revelation, and we cannot put this at the same level as the Word of God, inspired Word of God, which we cannot change. And a private revelation, she was transmitted to Sister Lucia, and she received this as her. And therefore, a private revelation can be in some way modified by the authority of the Church, or adapted to the changed historical situations when it is not changing the substantial meaning of the private revelation. And to mention Ukraine or all the nations of the world, it's not changing the substantial meaning, since as long as Russia is mentioned explicitly, which was never done before. And of course, Pope Pius XII in 1952, he consecrated Russia on the Russian people in plural. So not only, so he consecrated the peoples in plural of Russia, and only and alone, without the bishops. So in 52, it fulfilled the requirements of Our Lady. John Paul II in 84 did also not fulfill fully the requirements, even in union with all the bishops, but he did not mention Russia. And now Pope Francis is doing all the bishops and mentioning Russia, and simply adding Ukraine, because it is the historical connection evident, and all the people, the nations of the world. It is very meaningful. And I think that this will never, in the eyes of God, invalidate. We cannot how to say, who is the authority in the world now to measure this? Who has the authority to make now an authoritative interpretation of the words of Our Lady? Since the Lucia is not more alive, and these people who are writing in the internet and so on have no authority. Which authority they have? This is their personal opinion. And I think we cannot simply now start this confusion that everyone now stands up and formulates his own opinion of invalidation of not validation. This is a completely confusion. Yeah. And this is not the manner of God, of the Catholic Church. So we have to be grateful that the Pope did this, finally this, and then to leave this to God's providence. Hope that they will give the graces which Our Lady promised in due time, which we do not know the time, but God knows, and we have to trust. And it's, to my opinion, not healthy and not sane to start such discussions, and everyone declares himself authority to be able to interpret.
What are we going to make, Your Excellency, of the judgment by Sister Lucy on the over-inclusiveness, which is to say the underspecified nature of JP2's March 25th, 1984 consecration of Russia to Mary? He didn't name Russia. He just said all of the world.
Well, there are two different affirmations of Sister Lucia. 1 year after, in 85, she declared that this declaration was not fulfilling the rest of our faith. And this declaration was published in a magazine in Fatima. So it is proven, historical. Then 4 years later, in 89, she was probably under the impression of the breakdown of the communism in the East and of this euphoria atmosphere, and also Cardinal Bertone visited her and in some way influenced her to state that this was valid, and therefore she in some way changed her mind. So, but she has not the charism of infallibility, Sister Lucy. She was human, and she could also, in the specific historical situations, had in this way committed an erroneous interpretation of perception of this. And so, this is my explanation.
The famed Vatican exorcist, Father Gabriel Amorth, gives us the following account of what happened on March the 25th, 1984. From 10 feet away from JP2, Pope John Paul II, on that day, the morning of the consecration, at the very last moment, just before JP2 rose to deliver the consecration of Russia, a cadre of prelates suddenly surrounded JP2, says Amorth, and urged him in sharp whispers, don't name Russia. Don't name Russia. The Cold War was going on, and in the post-conciliar era after Vatican II, the Vatican had undergone and executed something called Ostpolitik, a strict policy of not adding to the tensions between the Soviet Union and the West. And so, according to Father Amorth, Ostpolitik dictated that the March consecration in 1984 of Russia could not be done fully faithfully. Is Ostpolitik still at work according to the slight change Pope Francis made March 20th or 21st this year to what he'd announced a week earlier on March the 15th? Previously, he said he was just going to consecrate Russia and the Ukraine. Now he's going to do all of humanity, but we hopefully can rely on the fact that he will still name Russia. Is this still Ostpolitik, or what's going on?
But we discussed in the beginning, I repeat, since substantial is mentioned, the substance, Russia, there is no meaningful doubt for me that they can be added all the other nations of the world. It would be not invalidate since the requirement to mention Russia is fulfilled. And Our Lady did not say the Pope has to consecrate only Russia or exclusively. So we cannot make our new, more narrow interpretation of that. We have to accept it is always, I repeat, private revelations are not as divine revelation public in such a way, untouchable. They can have some modifications during changed historical situation. We cannot, I repeat, treat our private revelation as the inspired, unchangeable word of the Holy Scripture. Holy Scripture we cannot change because it's a public revelation. But private revelation can be because it was not inspired by God. It was taught by Sister Lucia as she, in her subjective impression, heard these words. And so this is be determined by the Church in a manner that the Church authority can interpret revelation or make an application of the private revelation. And I repeat, as long as the substantial elements of the private revelation are observed. So the consecration to the Immaculate Heart, and not simply to Our Lady, and then to mention Russia explicitly, and to do with all the bishops. So these three elements are present, and add something other, which is not so substantial, is not invalidating. I repeat the same which I already said here.
Thank you for that clarification, Excellency. Do you mind if I ask you for a bit of personal speculation on your own half? In other words, as a lifelong Fatima enthusiast, I would note that consecration is a most simple prayer and at the same time a direct order on behalf of heaven. It seems downright, therefore, bizarre that 6 or 7 popes have failed to accomplish the very simple, a consecratory prayer, including Russia. Should we attribute to all these many failures at the simple something more? In other words, spiritual or preternatural intervention by the demonic? Am I reading too much into it? Is this the only thing left for us to conclude?
Yes, it is a question, because Our Lady in 29, she said to the Sister Lucia, now came the time that the Pope should consecrate Russia to my Immaculate Heart, 29. And we don't know, but if in those times the Pope would have done in 29, maybe the communist system would have crashed down in those times already. And maybe we would not have had the Second World War as in the same shape as we had these. We don't know, but it is possible. But we don't know the mysteries of God, why the popes, Pius the 11th, and then Pius the 12th, and the others did not the consecration. This is a mystery which we cannot now discover. It is in the mystery of God, and the mystery of also respects the human freedom of the Pope. He is a human being. He is not continuously inspired by the Holy Spirit. A Pope can also make errors, prudential errors or other errors. He is human. He is only rarely infallible. So in this case, the popes did not do this. They could do this, but we don't know why they did. It depends on their freedom, on their understanding. And so it's a fact. We cannot simply explain this deeply. It's a mystery.
Understood. Speaking of papal discretion, while I enjoyed the great honor of this interview, Excellency, I have a two-part question for you with regard to the third secret, or the third part of the secret of Fatima. Number one, do we now know any more about why John the 23rd, the Pope who convened Vatican II, opted against obeying the order of heaven given by Mary in 1917 to Sister Lucy, which required the third secret to be kept a secret until 1960, but revealed in 1960? We know any more about that? John the 23rd opted not to do so in 1960. So that's question number one. Question number two is, is it fully revealed after the year 2000? The Vatican took an extra 40 years from 1960 until 2000 to reveal it. And even after it was revealed in the year 2000, many believe it remains only half revealed. The visual part revealed, but the textual part of the third secret concealed still. What is your view?
No, since we now know the entire third part of the secret of Fatima, which was published, revealed, as we know, in 2000 in Fatima, in the presence of the Pope and Cardinal Ratzinger. And I cannot imagine, and the Holy See stated that Ratzinger, John Paul II, it is his authority that this is the entire text of the third part of the mystery. We have to believe that they could not lie the entire world to deceive John Paul II with such a high morality person and Cardinal Ratzinger. It is for me not possible that they would deceive us, the entire world, lie, I think. And therefore we have to believe their words that this text published in 2000 is really the third part of the secret of Fatima. But there we see a very in some way pessimistic scenario. Church is persecuted the world, and there is a half destroyed city with corpses of priests and so on. It is not an optimistic image, you know. It is really an image that the world is hostile to the church, and inside the church, the city is a symbol of the church. It's half destroyed. So when John, this is my personal interpretation. When John the 23rd read this part, 1960, he already announced the council. And when he began his pontificate, he began with an optimism and said it will come a springtime of the church. We are in the area of new Pentecost. And the world is friendly to us. We have to accept the dialogue of the world. So this attitude of John Paul II, his personal, was clashing, contradicting with what was expressed in the third part of the secret of Fatima. And all this enthusiasm around the council in 1960 would be not fitting with this third part. And therefore, I think he judged not to publish this. It was not fitting. It was in some way not political correct, or ecclesiastical political correct for him. And so now we are seeing it was revealed, but it could be in the biography of Sister Lucia about her life. There is a passage where Sister Lucia wrote that Our Lady told her later that she has to reveal the text. The text should be revealed of the third part of the secret of Fatima, but not what she told her, explained her about the third secret. So therefore we have to distinguish the text itself, which was revealed, and a possible existing explanation of Our Lady she gave to Sister Lucia. And maybe this explanation is not yet revealed, and maybe this explanation was also given to the Vatican, and it was not seemed to be revealed, because it's not a direct part formally of the secret itself. Therefore, when the Holy See in 2000 publicly stated to the entire world, this text is the entire text of the third part of secret, but they did not lie. Even if there would be still a text of explanation, which they did not publish. It could be. I don't know. This is a possibility only. And therefore we have, I think it would not lead us further to make simply speculations, which we have no text and no real foundations. And the scenario which people who seem to know are still a fourth secret of Fatima or another, this is a more of a fantasy of these people, and who all must agree in saying that Our Lady warned and said of the extraordinary crisis of the faith within the church, predicted. But we are stating this. We do not need a revelation of Our Lady to say us that there is a tremendous precedented crisis within the life of the church. We are facing this. We do not know. We do not need further revelation.
For the sake of perfect clarity, perfect accuracy, your view, am I right, Your Excellency, is that the third of the three-part vision shared by Mary with the Fatima seers is fully revealed after the year 2000, when the third, part 3 of the secret, was revealed by the Vatican, but that Mary's explanatory, interpretive words included in, I should say after the first two visions were shown to the seers, was never appended, was never added to the description of the vision after 2000. Is that correct? That there still is Mary's explanatory words? I mean, vision part 1, secret part 1 is a vision and then explanatory words by Mary. It's about hell. Then secret part 2 is a vision of Russia's role in the 20th century and then explanatory words by the Virgin Mary. Secret part 3 was not revealed in 1960 as it was supposed to be. They took 40 extra years. And then what they revealed, the Vatican that is, was just the vision, but without the interpretive explanatory words by Mary. Is that what you're saying?
No, I state that the text revealed in 2000 is really the third part of the secret, which Our Lady said to the children in 1970. This is for me sure, because the Holy See stated this, cannot lie. Or Cardinal Ratzinger or John Paul II could not lie in the entire world. But I repeat, there is in the biography of Sister Lucia an expression where is that Our Lady said that the secret itself she can reveal, but not the explanation of this secret. So the explanation which Our Lady gave, this could be given maybe later to Sister Lucia. We don't know. We have to distinguish.
Fascinating. And the world continues to pray on this score. Now, faithful Catholics, particularly Americans, are loath to trust the mainstream media, whether it's American mainstream media, Russian, or Ukrainian mainstream media. We don't trust any of it. You're a next door neighbor to what's going on there with Russia and Ukraine. I know you can't say too much. You might not even know. But what should a faithful Catholic, particularly an American in the West, think about the conflict of Russia, Ukraine, and again, in the particular context of Fatima 1917, The Second Secret, etc.?
First, as a bishop, I don't speak about politics. This is not for me a task of a bishop. Therefore, I will not speak about this conflict. Simple principle. But I only can admonish. I am lamenting and regretting that there is a war. This should every bishop always. And to pray, to make a crusade of prayers that this war should stop as soon as possible, because it is damaging the simple people in both sides, and is fomenting hatred between peoples. And this, I criticize the mainstream media, which are contributing continuously to that the hatred is growing.
Yeah.
And this is not Christian, not human. We have to do all what we can to reconcile the people there, to make a reconciliation between these two people. And the politicians, and especially the media, that means that there's a great responsibility not to, how to say, the fire of war and of hatred should be diminished, not increased. And to my opinion, they do all to increase this hatred. And therefore, we should do all what we can to call the people for peace, for reconciliation, for forgiveness, and pray to Our Lady and to help those who are suffering for our prayers, and also materially as we can.
Yes, Excellency. Thank you very much for that answer. One final question, which in my view brings everything together. What are the errors of Russia that Mary referred to? Isn't this phrase inclusive of more than simple Marxism? Does it include also materialism, transgenderism, feminism? The errors of Russia, never specified by the Virgin Mary in 1917, turned out to be a very important concept or set of concepts for the 20th century, and perhaps more in the 20th century. So is this term also more inclusive than many would deem?
Yes, she spoke in 1917 in view of the coming communist revolution, evidently. And there, the main error is the communism, Marxism, the materialistic style of life, the atheistic society without God. This is a grave error. And then to build the entire social, public, and private life only on material values, on these temporal. At least there are several errors. I mean, a completely atheistic style of life, as if God is not existing, to banish God from the society, very great error. The second is the materialism itself, the materialism. And I think these are the main errors which are spread in our Western society now, since decades. The Western society, the public life, in the schools, university, the parliaments of almost all the Western countries, they banished God completely from school, from parliament, and they promote a extremely materialistic lifestyle. So we are really overwhelmed with all this materialism continuously in the mainstream, in the culture, and this is for me. Now we are in the West, of course, Russia, also the current Russia, are living in this materialism, extremely material. But I think it's even worse in the Western world, this kind of atheism. And I think that for example, the spreading of the gender ideology, the gender ideology against family, against marriage. It is also a part of Marxism because Marx and Engels, they wrote that our final goal of Marxism communists will be destroy the family. This already was stated by the communists in the 19th century. And now we are facing that the Western societies are destroying a full program, marriage and family. So this is another grave error. And therefore, I think that the consecration of Russia is very timely, also to ask God that these big errors will to be diminished in our society, and also the conversion of Russia, which I consider should consist that the Russian Orthodox Church will reconcile, unite with the Holy See to be in full Catholic communion. This will be a true and a full conversion of Russia.
God willing. And what about the most potent era of Russia called feminism, which was used by the Soviets in fine, and now it's used by Western globalists and socialists to destroy the family entirely? Wasn't feminism, after all, a sort of proto-transgenderism? This is what I've argued in my book, The Case for Patriarchy. My wife has argued it in her book, Ask Your Husband, that feminism is much more noxious than transgenderism and was a sort of first iteration of transgenderism. After all, if a woman can act like her husband, if she can fungibly swap places with him and he can with her, then can't she be a man? If a man can act like his wife and take her role, can't he be his wife? This is our decided view. What is your view on the errors of Russia and feminism?
The feminism, it was partly only introduced by the communists, but not in that way which we are in the Western world. They, of course, in the communist time, they took the women from families and obliged the women to work in all the day. And the children were forcibly educated by the state, by the communist state. And sometimes the communists gave women works which were not appropriate for a woman, but more for men, very hard work. But I did not see, I lived in the communist time, a proper feminism in this way was not present there. But in the Western world, spread. Of course, the feminism, it is another expression of this destroyal of marriage and family. It's an attack against marriage and family. As I mentioned already, the Marx and Engels, they already wrote that the family is the last episode of the communism to destroy this bourgeois institution, as they call this family. And now in the Western world, the feminism was more spread than in the Eastern ex-communist countries.
Thank you, Excellency. And thank you, Parish Orphans and Retrogrades, for supporting this program. Remember to like, subscribe, click the notification bell. If you want to support the show directly, we always need help. Timothy J. Gordon at patreon.com. And if you want to support your own family, if you want to be your own best advocate, get out of your blue state. To do so, go to realestateforlife.org. Get to a red state. This is the time. This is the time prior to the midterm elections. Get out of your state sometime in late 2022. I advocate the broad red swath of blood red states here in the American Southeast. Anywhere, get to a red state, go to realestateforlife.org. This has been a real honor, Bishop, and I appreciate your time. Not 72 hours from the March 25th consecration, which happens in a matter of days. You've given me and my viewers no small amount of consolation. Bishop Strickland, your brother bishop, the same. He joined me yesterday. And all of us will pray for the Holy Father and give credit where it's due. This was a real surprise. And I don't know what else to say aside from what an honor it's been to have you on my show for the first time. Bishop Strickland's been on before. Your words are full of wisdom and full of comfort as well. The comfort and the light and the salt of truth. Thank you again, Your Excellency.
You are welcome. Thank you, Apostolate Continuo, and all the people who are hearing you. I wish that we be strengthened in our Catholic faith, in our hope, to be scared, not to be intimidated in this world. We are living in the crises because we have to renew our hope and our conviction that the Immaculate Heart will triumph. Will. And let us be good, loving children of Our Lady, to consecrate also our hearts to her Immaculate Heart, our families, and then join on the 25th with our prayers with the children of Fatima, Saint Francisco and Saint Jacinta. They will look down from heaven. And Sister Lucia also, we hope that she is also in the glory of God. And to pray with all the angels of Russia, of Ukraine, of all, to implore God really to pour out abundant graces of our time, and that these graces bear fruit in due time, which God already determined. So let us continue with hope and confidence. And I give you a blessing.
Thank you.
Dominus vobiscum, Spiritu tuo, et benedictio Dei omnipotentis Patris, et Filii, et Spiritus Sancti descendat super vos, et maneat semper. Amen. Praise be Jesus Christ.
Thank you, Your Excellency. Deus Vult.